All right. Welcome everyone to the last session of the day for day 2 of our conference. We're so grateful you're here with us at the end of your day. We have some great speakers for this topic. Just grateful to have you here. My name is Monica Ruiz, and I'll be your facilitator for this session. I'm also joined by my colleague Jacqueline Bing, who's our technology host. If you have any questions regarding the conference, technology issues, or even for the speakers, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will have time at the end of the presentation to go over your questions, but you can enter them in the chat throughout and we'll save those for you. This session is being recorded and the transcription is available through the Zoom platform. Before we begin, we want to let you know that the views and policies and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect those of SAMHSA or HHS. That said, I'd like to pass it over to our speakers, Sunny Cho and Jenny Lopez.
Thank you, Monica. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I understand this is the last presentation of the day, so we are honored to share space with you. We're Jenny and Sunny. We believe in the power of storytelling and storytelling of ourselves. So here we are, trying to be brave. We're consultants still learning and developing and wanting to grow and lean into our community. So we ask for your grace in advance as we attempt to summarize our growth journey as consultants with the work of Reflective Consultation Groups over the past few years in less than an hour. And so with that, I will toss it to Jenny to get us started. And hello, colleagues. Hello. Good to see you.
Buenas tardes. Yes, it is so lovely to see everyone. Thank you so much, Sunny. Buenas tardes. I am Jenny Lopez, pronouns she, her, hers, ella. I'm a curious student of life, and with that, I have deep gratitude for being able to be in practice here in the state of California as a bilingual and bicultural licensed clinical social worker and an infant, family, and early childhood mental health specialist. I do want to offer the floor to my esteemed colleague and friend once more to give you another moment to introduce yourself, Sunny.
Again, my name is Sunny, like Sunny Day, Sunny Cho, and my pronouns are she, her, and kunyo in Korean. I am a licensed marriage family therapist, and I am also IECMHC. Thank you for spelling that out for us. Yeah, I'm honored to be here with you guys.
So in our commitment to elevating stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County, we do want to take an intentional moment to acknowledge the land from which we join you today as occupied land originally and still inhabited by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash peoples. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live, work, and experience joy on these ancestral lands, and to be able to join you wherever you may joining us in all sorts of corners of the world. And so as we're getting started, we want to invite a moment to partake in a singular collective breath. Today, we invite you to take time to breathe throughout your journey with us, taking as many breaths as you need. They are free.
So I don't know if you guys can tell, but Jenny and I are both lovers of nature. So we imagined our story as a hike we've been on together for the past few years, and we'd love to invite you to take one with us today. We're going to start with the base camp to cover the basics. Then we're going to ascend together to reflect on some of the growth we've experienced. Then we're going to reach the Sierra or the peak point, which will include some challenges we faced, then descend together to think about some of the buds that have developed for us in our reflection as food for thought for the community. We're going to pause to the wondering to bring us back to where we are in the present with reflective groups, and end with a call to collective rest. Here, we've listed some learning objectives for our times together. But as expressed before, our real intentions are to really share on our little wisdom we gain from our experience, but to connect and lean into our community knowledge as we continue our journey. So please, we invite any feedback, reflections in the chat room, and connections after the presentation to further our growth in community. And with that, shall we get started, Jenny?
Absolutely. And so we'll get started by first taking time to reflect on the notion of base camp. So base camp traditionally is a main hub that provides supplies, shelter, communication for persons engaging in a wide range of activities. And so as Sunny and I have considered what has been the base camp of our reflective groups for the past 3 years, we both agree that the quality of community relationships has served as our base camp. These relationships serving as hubs that provide important communication and resources that we can access and support at whichever point we are in our journey, and can really take us through several places as consultants. We do like to take a moment to reflect that our story as IECMHC Reflective Group Consultants is deeply rooted in relationship. Our story began one day when both of us received a phone call from our colleague Sarah Parnas, at which time she took time to briefly check in with us, ask us how we were doing, and then casually asked us, would you want to be an infant early childhood mental health consultant? At which time we both replied, what do we have to do? And so she responded, you just have to be you. So our journey as consultants was sparked by our trusting relationship as infant and early childhood specialists and friends. And to this day, it continues to be fueled by the quality of relationships we've cultivated along the way. And so for a moment, I do want to go ahead and advise us that the slide on this specific slide may contain rather sensitive content. It may contribute to some stress. And so we encourage you to please check in with yourselves, attend to your needs. If you're needing to go off camera, take a break, take a stretching break, please do so. We really encourage you to practice that care, as your care is most important to us. And so to reflect on the current nature of our reflective groups is also to reflect on the historical and the cultural landscape of 2020 when we first began facilitating these groups. At the time, we were grappling with the offset of various things, among those the COVID-19 global pandemic, where millions of lives were lost worldwide. Also grappling with the killing of George Floyd, which continues to have a profound impact globally, sparking outrage and protests against police brutality and racial injustice. In 2020, the US presidential election was a time of political tension, polarization, there being contention around the handling of the pandemic, mail-in voting. And at the same time, we're also grappling with several climate disruptions across the world, including record-breaking wildfires here in California, in the Amazon rainforest, only to name a few. And so these contributing to major losses, human loss, wildlife loss, as well as the lost livelihood of entire communities, again, across the world. And so in holding this context, holding this landscape in mind, we want to highlight that the nature of our early childhood mental health consultation reflective groups are in fact an explicit response to where the community was at the time, what it was needing according to self-reports, what we were also needing, and the support we could provide based on our own cultural, socio-political backgrounds, our own experiences, as well as our own professional training. And so all to say that with all that was going on and has been going on, we've recognized that as frontline workers that we're meeting the needs as early childhood care providers, part of that community, we were all really just needing a reliable, safe, and brave community space where we could feel heard and seen and felt, to really help mitigate the high levels of overwhelm being experienced, as well as the magnitude of compassion fatigue and professional burnout, these groups essentially became a base camp to help us all be more present, to practice being more empathic, more compassionate, and to really become more attuned to relationships, really hoping that this would trickle down and pour over the children that we serve in our communities. And so throughout today's reflection and dialogue, you'll hear us commonly reference our participants. And so just to really bring them to the forefront, because they really have been the ones anchoring and guiding this work, we want to share that we came across paths as us personally being virtually based independent contractors. So since 2020, our group participants have been early childhood teachers, mental health paraprofessionals, center directors, regional center directors across the state of California, especially in communities of Los Angeles, here back home in Southern California, as well as communities in the Bay Area, to include the community of Fremont. So our participants were across 3 different agencies at different times, including community mental health centers, a nonprofit child development agency, as well as a Head Start program. And so wanted to also recognize that as we're talking about these participants, their environment, the agencies which they were part of, were at different phases of development, and we're also experiencing various and very diverse social dynamics. So noteworthy to share out. A little bit more about our participants is that we see the significance of them being a manifestation of cultural diversity. So we had participants who identified as African American, Latina, Asian, white, immigrant, first gen. And so at the same time, acknowledging and respecting the complexities of participants' vast intersectional identities, their own cultural compasses, and really wanting to highlight the unique traditions of all of our participants, or traditions, customs, languages, way of life. And so a deep gratitude to our hundreds of group participants who have been first responders and who have shared and trusted in us along this journey.
Well, to continue to cover our base camp, we wanted to bring up the consultative stance to ground us. I'm sure none of us, you are surprised by it, as we've been all reflecting on them all throughout the conference. One of the biggest growth milestones for us was being part of the certificate program with the Center of Excellence. Hi, Neil. Shout out. And we were so lucky enough to have found that early in our journey, where we got to dive into these elements. And we understood that, you know, these are truly the developmental markers for us as growing consultants, as well as evaluative tools we can use to reflect on the impact of our work. So naturally, we have used the consultative stance as lenses to evaluate our journey as consultants. And I think that completes the groundwork. So shall we ascend, Jenny?
You got it, Sunny. Thank you. So as we move forward in our shared hike here, we come to the ascent, which is a time where metaphorically we are climbing, we're rising up the mountain as co-facilitators, really taking time to reflect on our roses, what were some areas of growth, improvement, evolution, throughout the stages of design, implementation, evaluation, again, in diverse settings. So we thought, to keep it very honest and very transparent, that as first-time consultants, and again, within the historical and global context that we previously described as our landscape, our own affect dysregulation was inevitable at this time. It was natural. We too are human, having a very human experience. And so how did we cope with our affect dysregulation at the time? Well, we leaned into structure and tangibles. So we created concrete educational modules in the form of traditional mini trainings, as you can see on the image to your left here on the screen. This essentially being our initial byproduct. And while this tool was very helpful as an initial roadmap, we soon found that it had its limitations. These being that we were now needing to expand by listening and honing into our social and emotional needs in order to be helpful containers, capable of holding and tuning into the needs of participants and the whole group process. And so as we ascended by gaining perspective from feedback received, whether that was an intentional dialogue that we were having with participants or receiving emails, which were also very wonderful, or as a byproduct of ruptures experienced during our reflective groups, the more that we leaned on the following qualities. So I'll highlight a couple of these. So one being bidirectional attunement, where now we were placing more significance on tuning into our needs to better support the needs of group participants. Two, really honing in around, as you mentioned, Sunny, the centrality of relationships, where we now found ourselves deviating and shaking up the need to shift the reinforcing of hierarchical dynamics, which means taking on the role as the expert or the holder of knowledge, as traditional mental health providers. So again, really listening, trusting in the inherent wisdom of our participants, encouraging participants to honor their needs, to practice self-agency and self-determination. And thirdly, finding that we were now meeting people where they are. So our attuned design began to be informed by deeper understanding of participants' strengths, their areas of need, their history, which included learning more about their relational history with management potentially, learning more about their life transitions in the moment, hearing about their grief and loss at this time, better understanding stressors they were experiencing, and also having more curiosity about their own relational ruptures in the past. So the more we learn into these elements, as you've said, Sunny, through our learning, which really encouraged us to give more attention to this, the more that we started to recognize that now we were really upholding the lens of diversity and empowerment. And so here, we take a moment to reflect on the hallmarks of implementing. What were some of the highlights that we found to be really helpful during this phase? And so for one, we found that having a consistent flow week by week, each reflective group, including these hallmarks, turned out to be extremely helpful. So these included a warm welcome, a moment for collective mindfulness practice, where together we all benefited, but from co-regulating through deep breathing, body scans, taking a moment to also engage in group pulse checks. How's the group doing? Or doing more individual check-ins, really depending on the size of the group. There was also the piece of guiding participants to identify what was a topic they wanted to focus on that day. And if they were needing some encouragement, really leaning on things that perhaps we identified when we had last debriefed regarding this group. A couple more components include summarizing group reflections near the end to really help improve mentalizing skills, because essentially we wanted folks to be able to take a better take on others' perspective, encouraging their own reflection, and finally identifying the potential action items as ways to encourage people to continue building skills. And so in order for us to continue to provide these groups consistently, it became imperative to integrate regular collective breaks during slower seasons of the year, where we found there to be a cyclical pattern of participation. And so what we started doing was taking time off during summer breaks or taking extended time off during winter holiday breaks. And so this was our way to really cultivate, walking the walk, a culture of wellness, where we were encouraging pauses, slowing down, caring for each other, and really encouraging folks to connect to their families, connect to their broader community. And so in this next point here, we just really wanted to highlight some themes that really emerged throughout the years. Of course, these are only very broad strokes, but nonetheless, we thought that these just really became key themes of observations that we were making as consultants. So as you can see, in 2020, there was a lot of trial and error that was happening. And so we did have to grant each other permission to pivot, shift gears to really improve the quality of our groups. This is where also we incorporated more of that bidirectional component that we've mentioned. In 2021, we realized that we had to have very significant reckoning around, we are experiencing a collective trauma at this time. All that has been going on. And so we really began to wonder, what is needed in this moment? Really finding ourselves landing on the need for a first aid wellness tool, and tools, for early childhood educators and community. And another thing that we found is part of providing this tool, this wellness kit, was having opportunities for us to collectively practice ways to attune, to practice co-regulation through mindfulness practice. Then in 2022, of course, Sunny and I, we got training in the child, which you may or may not be familiar, but essentially it's a climate of healthy interactions for learning and development. And so this being a tool to really promote children's healthy social and emotional development in the classroom setting. So that became another layer of our work from which we began to see the work. And ultimately, most currently now in 2023, where we've landed is really on the centrality of relationships as our North Star, where we really believe that that is integral to creating a culture of wellness. And we are very much in a phase of wondering about other settings where we can implement reflective practice, which we're very much excited to share more about later on today.
So we did want to kind of zoom in to our developmental touch points. And, we're using this term touch points as used by our godfather, Dr. Barry Brazelton. But for those of us who might not be familiar, touch points are predictable periods of regression or disorganization that occur before the bursts in a child development. And we, as consultants and group facilitators, also have had multiple touch points in our journey that brought us some disruptions in the ways that we've been doing things, but ultimately resulting in spurts of development after, right? So, Jenny talked a lot about the centrality of relationship, but I did want to emphasize the point that this felt like a disruption in the ways that we've been taught as clinicians of community mental health for decades, to assess, to diagnose, and to treat. And the ways that our participants have experienced more of that traditional mental health services for their children and for themselves even. The second one is parallel process as organizing principle. As we continue to lean more into prioritizing relationships over productivity in different ways, there was a bit of fear in us that we weren't doing enough. We really had to ground us in the principle of parallel process to realign ourselves and be patient with seeing the fruits of consultative stance. So when we felt like, this push to come in as the experts or quickly resolve issues by giving interventions, we had to remind each other of the parallel process. And slowly but surely, we began to hear testimonies and accounts from participants how they were experiencing the way our being with them is kind of, hey, it's working amongst their colleagues and children that they were working with. Avoiding the position as the expert, again, we shared about this point, but really to highlight that this was disorienting for us in the beginning. And surprisingly, it took us some time to convince the participants in the groups that we didn't come as the experts. It really took us time and effort that we just came to be with them, but with precision and pursuit of excellence, with our experience and skills and commitment to our own reflective work, right? And so we experienced this like pivot in our posture towards each other that was wonderful to experience. Mutuality of endeavor. Once we were able to establish trust in the groups and finally convince them that we're not going to give them quick answers to solve behavioral concerns that they were grappling with, we began to engage in this co-creation of our group spaces, which actually felt kind of new and uncomfortable in the beginning. We were like, stepping on each other, still learning this new way of dancing. But it's become really fruitful in ways that we didn't expect to see. Lastly, understanding another subjective experience, we realized we had done way too much talking in the beginning of our journey. Then we grew to really listen to their voices rather than our own. And in some sessions, I really feel like we've done hardly any talking at all ourselves, and saw that people were connecting and they're reflecting and growing together, and we were just holding. And as we allow for, their subjective experiences to take up more of our space, we really began to experience authentic and deep reflections of, challenging topics like power and privilege, implicit biases, racism, and other isms that they were experiencing at work, and that were very relevant to them, and the ways how those issues were impacting the children that they were working with. And Jenny will talk a little bit more about those feedback that we received.
That's right. So feedback became really, really important, especially during the evaluation phase. And so what we found is that through qualitative form, what participants were really consistently sharing with us is that they were really feeling a felt and deeper sense of trust. And so we were now hearing stories and witnessing that CDs were finding creative ways to connect outside of programmed staff meetings, where they were now intentionally visiting each other's centers and classrooms to say hello, to provide hands-on support. We're also learning about just deeper connection in the sense that there was just a genuine desire to help and support each other. And this definitely shone brightly. There was a time that we were recalling when someone was disconnected from our virtual gathering, and in a matter of seconds, participants were brainstorming solutions, delegating texts and alternative modes of communication to bring everyone back together. And so we could see that they really valued each other's participation, where everyone's participation, again, it mattered. Also getting feedback that this was feeling more and more as a safe space, where they now felt that they could share very heartfelt childhood stories, and this becoming the foundation for deeper and more authentic and meaningful connection. We also witnessed the manifestation of this being a brave space, where at one time, the only white male in our group, he acknowledged his privilege without any prompting. His honest recognition of his power in that moment, in that dynamic, inspired others to really begin trusting this group as a place to continue cultivating reflection and really practice the brave work of taking accountability for implicit biases, power, and privilege. And last but not least, we gathered feedback that this was really feeling like a third space where they could feel safe. They felt seen. We're also experiencing respite, where they truly felt they could lean on each other, which was most important to us.
So here we are. This will be the Sierra. And again, our journey wasn't all just roses and sunshine. And there were many moments where we had to work through our sore points and challenges. So we thought it was important for us to reflect on those thorns of our journey too. First, ruptures in relationships. We definitely realized we are in the business of relationship, and we've experienced many ruptures, and they're natural, right? Some we were able to brave through repairs. Some we were not so successful in repairing. And whether it was with our own supervisors, program managers, or group participants, committing ourselves to really facilitate repairs in relationships were most challenging for us, and an area where we still want to continue to grow in. Transitions. We learned that the field of early education and interventions is filled with transitions for students, for staff, with roles, positions, policies, you name it. And we were holding the waves of, all those transitions. And on top of that, we were often going through our own transitions as consultants. And so this was quite a bit of challenge for us. And we try to stay as regulated as possible through co-regulation, which we will talk about, so that folks can borrow from our calm through their storms, right? Maneuvering through different roles as contractors and working with different organizations in their developmental stages with their programs. That was pretty unique too. Learning kind of the nuances of our roles as contracting consultants versus employees with different agencies, their own cultures, it was hard to figure out kind of the different expectations, boundaries, and resources available to us. And I think it really required us to be flexible and be okay with asking others to be flexible with us. Opportunities for better measure of outcomes. We gather some data, but we're just not trained in it, you know? And so we wanted more support in this area to gather more feedback, to see the impact of our groups, perhaps even opportunities for longitudinal impact. Yeah, that's something that still is sore for us. Sustainability, you know, it's always part of hard work for all of us in this field. And one aspect of sustainability we struggled with was continuously motivating ourselves to like reflect on our social location and ways to bring in our authentic selves into these group spaces. And it took us intentional prep time, an hour of prep time before the group and an hour of debrief time afterward to really engage ourselves. And, you know, to be honest, there were many times, and I can't speak for Jenny, I wanted to skip doing the hard work of reflections together. And so thank goodness Jenny was around. And lastly, holding hope in community. You know, one of the highlights of our experience as consultants, being part of the Center of Excellence certificate program, as mentioned before, definitely not paid marketing here, but we truly felt it was an amazing opportunity for us. And we highly recommend everyone to go and partake in this wonderful training process. And, you know, the highlight was that we got to connect with other consultants from all over the country and be inspired through their work. And we just needed more of that. And as independent consultants, it was hard for us to find, community. So, that was a lot. And here we are. As we descend now, we bring some bud offerings that made us become more curious about, as food for thought for you guys in our community. So as we've been reflecting, we became curious about what were some things that were pivotal in our growth as consultants over the years, and what has helped us sustain our work. And these are only a few that we came up with, and we would love to hear from you what helps you to go on with this work, because this work is hard and arduous, and there's a reason why there's not that many of us. And so, yeah, very curious to hear from you what helps you to go on with this work, but these are just some that we came up with, having relationships based on trust, access to quality training, access to supervisors who are culturally affirming and who helped us to feel seen, heard, and understood. We actually got to work from home, and that was one of the benefits of leading groups from, for all parts of California. Consistent reflective space, and the other big piece that we didn't want to overlook was just patience and grace that we had to extend, and we got to extend, and we received from our supervisors and through each other, because it's been a journey to really understand that really being who we are, right, is truly what we do. And we received reflection or reflective supervision, where the supervisors were simply being with us in their excellence. They were rooted in knowledge and skills and experience, but they really helped us to show up as ourselves. Now, but if we had to choose one thing that made all the difference in our work, one thing that really allowed us to grow in our embodiment of the consultative stance in these group spaces, is that very simple: we were not alone in our work. Jenny and I got to co-facilitate most of the groups we've led. I think about our field in general, and so much of our work in mental health, it's done in isolation, it's done alone. Oftentimes I see one consultant holding several centers, lots of staff members, and expect to do much of the work alone as the consultant. But boy, we loved co-facilitation of these spaces. And, if anyone is interested in using group spaces for consultation, we highly encourage doing it with a partner. There was something so unique we experienced in peer reflection that was beyond what we were receiving through reflective supervision. I think perhaps supervision, as wonderful as it is, still kind of limits some aspects of our growth with elements of power dynamics coming through, right? There is something about that. And I remember attending one of the sessions too, talking about how, yeah, more and more of us are wanting more peer spaces. So we were able to, have this play space in peer reflection that allowed us to be free in self-exploration and experience growth. And we try to list just a few of the benefits we've experienced in with co-facilitation here. But one of the biggest impact, and I want to speak to kind of being culturally responsive, one of the biggest impact that co-facilitation had in our work was bolstering growth in our own reflexivity and cultural reciprocity as BIPOC identifying consultants. A lot of things were coming up for us as we were learning and growing. And, the work towards this cultural competence is our personal responsibility as mental health consultants, yet we really believe it's something to be done with each other in a safe and trusting relationship. And before I move on, by the way, we're grateful for our mentor, Don Yazo, who has gently pointed out to us that perhaps cultural competence is elusive and we should be striving to be more culturally responsive. We love that. We're like, you're right. But yeah, working, together as partners really allowed space for accountability for us. And there was this natural growth in self-awareness as we brushed up against each other's differences and learned to respect and honor the beauty of diversity we brought to our work and our groups. And we believe that our hard work of intentional peer reflections together is really what guarded us against being culturally reactive and being more culturally responsive to the challenging conversations that organically came about from the participants. And going back to the beginning of what our colleague Sarah Parna said when she gave us a call, she was she said, you just have to be you. Yes, we did learn that. I have to be me, but we learned through this process that I need you to be me in excellence, with precision, with skills, with intention, right? With grace, with love. And so it was a journey for us to kind of learn that. And with that, I'd like to bring us to a bit of more space of wondering.
Thank you, Sunny. It always touches my heart to hear your reflection. And so with that, yes, we are now here in wondering, also just recognizing that we are near the end of our reflection. So we are wanting to share that as of this year, Sunny and I, along with our beloved colleague, Rene Melara, have begun to incorporate pillars of reflective group consultation and its 10 elements of consultative stance outdoors, out in nature. And so to follow, we'll share a little bit more about that. So this is very much an effort to, again, bring these components in different diverse settings. And because, as mentioned earlier, we are nature lovers and definitely lean on our relationship to nature to support our own co-regulation, very excited to find creative ways to integrate this work. And so this has really given life to the Sierra Thrives Learning Series, where our objective is to enhance the capacity of current nature outing facilitators and helping them hold the lens of social and emotional learning, as we know as SEL, which is, again, to be rooted in IECMHC consultation, as we understand that outing facilitators play an integral role in how communities especially communities of color, especially young children, youth, and families, helping them access and also find ways to relate to public lands in a way that helps them tap into nature's healing benefits. Because as we know, and science is now catching up, nature does play a very important role in supporting our mental, emotional, and social well-being. And so as we are nearing the end, we want to share the following words, hoping that it really helps us begin to tie in elements of today's reflection. So to follow is from Luis Valdeles Pensamiento Serpentino, where he says, he does not say actually, he builds off of the notion of Inlakech, creating this beautiful poem where he reads, tú eres mi otro yo, si yo te hago daño a ti, me hago daño a mí. Si te amo y respeto, me amo y respeto yo. In English translation, you are my other me. If I do harm to you, I do harm to myself. If I love and respect you, I love and respect myself. So really wanting to acknowledge Mayan culture, their elders who have granted us those universal words that I really think speak to the tremendous gratitude that I feel in my heart to have had the opportunity to be able to embody more of Inlakech in my role as an early childhood consultant and specialist. Inlakech really being a fundamental life principle intended to center our behavior and our thoughts as a way of being. And so really wanting to identify that the reason we titled our workshop today with these powerful words is that this whole journey has reminded us of our humanity. It's reminded us of our interconnectedness. It's really reminded us to really revere life with all that has happened. It's allowed us to encourage a recognition of ourselves and each other as to help us really become even more united in recognizing each other's humanity. And so really wanting to bring that full circle for all of us as we're nearing our end today.
Yeah. So here we are. We've come to our collective rest. All for that. And we wanted to encourage you to consider two different definitions of rest. One is to pause and cease work in order to refresh and recover, right? We encourage you to rest up throughout this conference and throughout your work because we need you for the long haul. You are my other me. And the other definition is to be placed on or supported as to stay in a specified position, like I rest my arm on this desk. So we encourage you to find a colleague and experience resting on each other and in community as you continue your work, right? Yuri Bronfenbrenner, fun to say, Bronfenbrenner said, every child needs at least one adult who is irrationally crazy about him or her. We believe we also need a colleague, a supervisor, or partner or mentor who is irrationally crazy about our work as clinicians and mental health consultants to share in this partnership together. So with that, our charge is for you to slow down, rest on each other, and fill your cup in community today.
And last but not least, a big shout out and thank you and muchas gracias to all, especially our California community, colleagues at Cadengo, El Centro de Amistad, Volunteers of America. Of course, a very warm thank you to our mentor, Don Yassel, and of course, the Center of Excellence for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation. Thank you, Sunny.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you both. One question that has come up in the chat is if everyone will have access to the wellness tools.
Yes, the wellness tool we are referring to is kind of the curriculum that we came up with, the roadmap of just the topics that were kind of covered. Now, because we were working with different organizations, I don't know if we would have like access to the actual curriculum information. But we are able to kind of send you a brief, maybe the image that we saw, the roadmap, which covers some of the topics that were pertaining to kind of the first aid kit that we were thinking of. So we went with, starting with like being, right, learning about regulation, self-regulation, and then we moved on to being with, co-regulation and relationships and repairs and ruptures. And then we moved on to being amongst others to talk about systems and what's beyond us, our environments, and how those have an impact on our social emotional well-being. So yeah, we can definitely, if you leave your emails, we can maybe forward that image to you as to help you guide your thought process and bringing some topics to share. Yeah, it does sound like FAN, which I love. FAN is a wonderful model. So yeah.
I'm wondering if that's something that maybe you could provide and we could upload along with the materials we provided to the event. That way you can go back and ensure we won't miss your email. You can just go back to the link.
Yes, that's a great idea. We'll
be sure to take care of that.
Okay,
We do have a couple more minutes if anyone has other questions they'd like to bring to our speakers today. You can put them in the chat or raise your hand so we can unmute you.
Thank you, Alina. Those are kind words.
Just one more minute.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your kind words.
Yes, we're definitely taking it in. We appreciate your feedback.
We are truly grateful for this presentation today. It was a beautiful journey. I concur with all the comments that are coming in through the chat. This hike was just a great way to end the day.
And you didn't even have to break a sweat.
Me, because I'm feeling a little sweaty after this conversation. Beth, regarding the certificate program, it's through Georgetown Center of Excellence. They have a 9-month, I believe it's 9 months, right, Jenny? It's a 9-month process, and it's for working professionals. So we met once a month, and it was truly amazing to just hear from luminaries and just wealth of knowledge from all sorts of professions. So yeah, and meeting colleagues from all over the country doing this work has been one of the true kind of value I took away with.
And I am putting in the chat a link to sign up for our newsletter, which we provide information on those.
There you go.
Tickets and any other events that are coming through.
I feel as though it should be required. Like all consultants should go through this training process.
Yeah, so definitely look out for different opportunities. I know in the state of California, there are also other certificate programs. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to check those out because they can also vary in fees. And so maybe something to consider. I think we were very fortunate that we did have at the time agencies who did cover for either they covered or because we were consultants, there was a way to get the fee waived. Yeah. So for those of you that might be considering holding that piece too.
I also highly recommend the NAPA fellowship as well. Fellowship in infant mental health, which is just a wonderful space to learn more about infant and early childhood mental health. Oh, yay, another alum.
Thank you again. We are at time. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing everyone again tomorrow for day 3.
Have a good rest of the day.